Thank you for coming. My name's Peter Foreman. I'm president of the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. And this is one of a series of forums we've held throughout the year for candidates for various public offices. We use very different forums depending on the race and the candidates. The forum we like most, though, is what you'll see in this forum, which is a conversation between two candidates, and not a formal debate, not necessarily looking for a lot of fights, but just looking for a good conversation between the two top contenders for office. It's a forum we've used, and I thank our partners who are co-hosting with us this morning to allow us to use that forum. We bring in a professional to lead the conversation, and I'm pleased to introduce a real pro at this. Stan Blackmer is publisher of South Shore magazine and the host of WATD's South Shore Live. Stan?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. First up, just want to welcome everyone here to the Mill Wharf. Thank you to their generosity for this spot, and thank you to our host, the Scituate Chamber of Commerce, co-host Marshfield, Norwell, and Weymouth Chambers, as well as the Hingham Business Council, and our organizer of these conversation with the candidates is the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. And again, thank you to the Mill Wharf and our sponsor for this morning, CBA, Comprehensive Benefits Administrators. And then thanks to Scituate Cable for recording today's conversation. Linda Ferguson, would you like to say a word or two?
Good.
You're all set? Okay, great, thank you. So this is, again, a conversation. It's not a debate. I'm going to post some questions to the candidates and give them ample and equal time to answer the list of topics that we have. And if there's time, I may add a topic or two, but we'll see how the clock works for us going forward. So I'd like to introduce Senator Patrick O'Connor and Dr. Katie McBrine, both running for the state Senate seat. Welcome, guys. Katie, I'm going to let you go first just to give our guests and viewers an opportunity, a little bio about yourself and your background.
So my name is Katie McBrine. I'm a pediatrician at Scituate Pediatrics, which is just down the way over there at the Jacob Hatch building. I've been there for going on almost 7 years now, 6 to 7 years. I'm a wife. I'm a mom of 2 kids. They're 6 and 8 years old, and got a huge bag of candy yesterday for Halloween. And they go to public school. We live in Hingham. The most asked question that I get is, why am I running? I mean, I love being a pediatrician. It's an amazing job. I get to hang out with hilarious kids all day and help them. But unfortunately, over the years, healthcare has just become more and more of a mess, and I'm watching my family struggle more and more. I'm also a partner of Healthcare South, so I'm a business owner, and every year we have debates about what we're going to do about healthcare, because the healthcare costs just keep rising astronomically. And so, rather than screaming in my kitchen anymore, I decided that I wanted to run. Unfortunately, we don't have any physicians in our state senate right now. We haven't had a physician since 1936 that I could find, and I think it's about time that we had another. My son is an amazing kid, but he was born with hearing loss. So not only do I see healthcare from the outside and helping my families constantly, but I see healthcare from the inside when I have to struggle to have my son get the care that he needs to get. And on either side, it's just a complete mess. Having said that too, we goes to public school, and getting him the services that he needed in order to help hear better in school was some trials and tribulations. So our education system needs improvement and needs funding for it. So those are 2 big passions of mine, and that's kind of why I decided to jump into the race, to bring those new skill sets, new experiences to our state house.
Thank you. Patrick O'Connor.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Patrick O'Connor. I have been the state senator for the Plymouth Norfolk district for the past 2.5 years. Prior to that, I served 12 years on the Weymouth Town Council, representing 55,000 residents in my hometown. I've been proud, honored, and privileged to be able to represent you up in the Massachusetts State Senate. Together, working alongside Charlie Baker at the state level, we've created 110,000 new jobs here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We reversed an $800 million deficit and turned that into a $1 billion surplus. And we've put in place a compassionate but aggressive approach to the opioid crisis that is producing results. On the local level, we've secured money for libraries, schools, water infrastructure, record local aid for our school districts, for public safety, and in total have delivered over $317 million in the 2.5 years that I've been in office back here to 8 communities that I represent. I want to continue to be in this position because working together in a bipartisan fashion, we're producing real results for Massachusetts and real results for the 8 communities here in the South Shore. A little bit more background: during the 12 years that I've been able to serve on the Weymouth Town Council, I had the privilege of working alongside some great individuals. And when I became president of the Weymouth Town Council, one of which is here today, Michael Melise, Weymouth Town Councilor, but working alongside those 11 individuals, 9 of them were Democrats, 1 was Republican, and 1 was an independent. And I was privileged to get their vote and their support in order to become the town council president in 2014. It goes to show that I work in a bipartisan fashion, put people before politics, and will always look out for the interests of this district. And most importantly, and I believe that this is the most important function of the state senator, we've helped thousands of people in need, connecting them to state resources, as well as helping them in their time of need. And that could be as simple as helping somebody navigate the new Real ID system created by the RMV, to finding someone a bed for their son or daughter that night because they're struggling with addiction. This is a job I take extremely seriously, and I would love to continue to do it for the next 2 years.
Yeah, thank you very much, Patrick and Katie. The first question that I'd like to pose is about workforce development. In spite of very strong economy that we have here on the South Shore, there are still several industries and services and what have you that can't find proper fits for their job needs. Katie, can you address your thoughts on workforce development?
Yeah, I think exposing kids to opportunities and the fact that there are jobs like that out there is really necessary, right? So one of the things that I hear all the time is that the trades, right? Trades need more people. We need more welders and things like that. But our school system has kind of gotten into this narrow viewpoint of you go to school, you go to high school, and then you go to college, and you do this kind of straight path. But life is funny that way, right? Life takes twists and turns, and you don't have to take that path. Not every kid should take that path. And I think we need to expose kids more to these opportunities. There are ways to expose kids to the trades without just saying, take wood chopping class, right? The arts is a really great way to expose kids to it. If you have to build a deck, then you get exposed to woodworking and electrical stuff and all sorts of things. So these are great ways to show kids and put their hands in there to decide, well, maybe actually I really like doing this. This is really good. I can do this. So, and adding those things to our education system and showing kids that these are other opportunities, and then of course supporting it, right? We have to support education. Kids are our future. We need to invest in our future. And that's one of the big things on my platform, is that we need to change around how we do funding for education so that we can fund these programs and that we're funding kids and that we can fund our workforce, because that's where our workforce comes from, right?
Thank you. Patrick, your thoughts on workforce development?
Sure, I'm proud to serve as the ranking member of the Labor and Workforce Development Committee up at the State House, both the joint committee, so in the House and the Senate. And I was proud to support legislation that Governor Baker crafted and has implemented, where we actually changed the structure of how we educate children and the programming that we offer for children at the high school level to meet the needs of 3 critical areas, and that's STEM, healthcare, and manufacturing. And what we're doing is we're finding companies that need employees and then attracting children who don't want to go the traditional 4-year college route or 2-year college route or go the trade route to go into a career. And not just a career, but a living, something that they're going to get benefits in, they're going to get a good wage, they're going to be able to retire with. And this is one of the things we've been able to do. The second thing we've been able to do is connect local businesses. So I do a small business tour, basically year-round. And one of the people that I met was Ed Lofgren, who owns 3A Marine. And he was telling me that as the boat engines change, as we can see all the marine economy that we have here in the South Shore especially, as boat engines change, they become more computerized. You need actually technicians to fix boat engines now rather than just simple mechanics. And the need for boat engine technicians is huge. So what they were able to do is they were able to take a child out of Hingham High School for about 2 periods a day who didn't fit in the traditional education structure, and they were able to bring them over there because he loved working with his hands and loved being able to use what he had, the skills he had in technology. And over the course of 2.5 years, while he was in high school, they trained this kid to be a boat engine technician. And by the time he graduated Hingham High School, he went straight to work at 3A Marine. So I think workforce development is thinking out of the box in order to get things done, to make sure that those who need employees are matched with those who want to work. And I believe in Massachusetts we're doing an incredible job at that, because when I first started I said we've created 110,000 new jobs. Those numbers I believe are lower. When you look at some of the growth that we've had in different sectors, Massachusetts is on the rise, and it's in large part to the creative thinking and creative matchmaking and placing that we're doing with people, individuals, to go to work.
Perfect. Thank you very much, both of you. For those who are tuning in now, we're here with Patrick O'Connor and Dr. Katie McBrine, running for the Massachusetts State Senate for our district. Big topic here. It has many facets, so this may take a little longer than our first two. Infrastructure needs. Just talking, sitting here at Scituate Harbor, seawalls are a big issue with climate change and just outdated and antiquated seawalls, roads, water, sewer are some of the elements of the infrastructure that we can discuss, or if you have something else that you'd like to throw into the mix, please do. Go ahead, Katie.
Just that, what do we want to do about it?
Yeah, infrastructure needs. I mean,
need it?
what do you see as issues, and how would you, as a senator, address these needs for the region?
Yeah, no, I mean, infrastructure is obviously really important, right? We can't get to work if our roads have holes in it, right? Scituate has a real problem with its water being exceedingly brown, and so these are all really big issues that affect the health and well-being of people, which is ultimately what I care about. And so, you know, a lot of this, what this comes down to is funding. So when it comes to seawalls, that's a short-term solution, the expensive short-term solution. There are scientists looking at things all the time. I'm a science person. I love science. I love that people are looking at this and coming up with innovations. Climate change is not something that just affects us. It affects all over the United States on coastal areas. We can look at the other things that coastal communities are doing to try to improve it in a way that could be more economical than just building seawalls. But you know, we got to protect our people, so that's just kind of a short-term solution. But we need longer-term solutions. We need better longer-term solutions, like natural barriers and stuff. So I think looking at what's been going on there and then implementing it. It's not just enough to look at a study, but you actually have to move on the study and implement it for people. So that's from the infrastructure standpoint. From a climate change, that's what we need to do. We've done some stuff for it. There was a climate change bill where we've had some movement on that, but I think Massachusetts needs to be a leader, especially when it comes to that, because we need to move faster in order to help people. And then there's a lot of, like, our MBTA transportation system is it's a mess. You know, as with anything that's mechanical, things break down, and if you don't invest in it, then they keep breaking down, as is evidenced by our trains that keeps breaking down constantly. And if you can't get your workers to work, then that's a real big problem with our economy. So we need to invest in that. And there's been a couple of thought processes on what we can do to raise the money in order to do that. And I discussed a couple of them before. Candidate Jay Gonzalez has talked about putting a tax on universities, endowments of over $1 billion to try to raise money for education, and some of that would go to transportation. There was a fair share amendment. So I think we need to look into ways so that we can invest in our infrastructure. It's vastly more.
Thank you. Patrick?
Thank you. Infrastructure has been an issue that I've been dealing with for quite some time, both in my years in municipal government as well as the state government. I crisscross this district every single day and talk with local officials about what infrastructure needs they have. Yesterday alone, we had Secretary of Housing and Economic Development, Jay Ash, come down and award the town of Scituate $2.2 million for sewer upgrades, as well as the town of Weymouth $640,000 for a daylighting project in the Weymouth Landing, which has been long ongoing. So to sort of trace this back, bigger infrastructure projects that we've had here since I've taken office, we have the Winter Repair Bridge project, which was in the works for quite some time, but now is under construction. We have the Route 18 project currently ongoing. We have finished the Fall River Bridge. These are all major infrastructure projects that we were able to either oversee, be there at the very beginning, or be there at the very end to make sure that these projects happen, because these are economic drivers. Secretary Pollock always says that transportation investment and infrastructure investment is not just an investment in making roads better or in making seawalls better, but it's about building our economy. And I truly believe that. I'm a firm buyer into her philosophy. And so as we continue to do that, and I go to my towns and I go to the Board of Selectmen and the school committee and the planning boards and all these other meetings, when I talk to local elected officials, they tell me about these certain projects. Some are small, some are large. But we've been able to bring back and secure record aid for all of these various infrastructure projects through brand new projects such as the brand new funding mechanisms such as the Dam and Seawall Repair Fund, which Representative Jim Cantwell and Senator Hedlund, when I was working for him, had a large role in creating. And we've been able to take that money and secure tens of millions of dollars for Scituate, for Marshfield, for Weymouth, just for seawalls alone. And then when you look at the Mass Work grants that we were able to secure, which basically connects some of the projects that communities have that they may not fund themselves, but they know that if they get that project done, that's going to create jobs in the community. That's going to bring economic development to the community. That's going to increase the tax base in the community, and therefore, in turn, increase funding for education and public safety. These are all the things I think about and go into every single day when I enter the State House or when I make a phone call to the Baker administration to say, hey, look, I need you to come down to Scituate. I need you to look at this project. And Jay Ash joked around the other day, he said it's half advocate, half pest. But that's what you have to do when you're trying to secure as much and deliver as much for this district as I try and do day in and day out. And we have all of this listed on our website. I mean, you can go through it. But we have secured quite a bit of money for coastal infrastructure, for regular infrastructure, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you very much. The next topic is another hot button and important factor here on the South Shore, which is housing. And I would like to also mention that the South Shore Chamber of Commerce has put together a very comprehensive 2030 housing report. If you have not had the opportunity to read it, you can find it on the South Shore Chamber's website, southshorechamberofcommerce.org. There was a very, very explicit direction that the report refers to about housing and housing needs here on the South Shore. So, Katie, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, on housing and the 2030 report.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like every one of these are going to be like, this is really important, because there are so many really important things, right? So this is really important, right? Because you have to live somewhere, you have to have a house, and affordable housing is a big problem, because we need a diversity in our community. We need our seniors to have places to live, and we can't be pushing people out, and so we need to improve on this. We need to have the ability for people to buy in and live in the district that they want to, and live in the town that they want to. And so I look at the plan, and I think that's, I mean, we need to move forward on it and figure out ways in which that we can improve housing. And I will tell you that there are many towns that aren't quite hitting the 10% 40D that we need to be hitting, because that's part of affordable housing, right? And so we need to figure out ways in which we could talk with those towns. I do think that you need a lot of local input on where everything goes and figure out what we can do to kind of increase it, what would make sense, how can we do this, not only for that fits with the town, but also for the environment too. Like new stuff going in, we have to make sure that we're helping the environment and we're doing it in a clean way that makes sense.
Thank you. For our viewers listening to conversation with the candidates, with Senator Patrick O'Connor and Dr. Katie McBrine. Patrick, what's your thought on the housing elements here on the South Shore?
Sure, and I think there's two approaches to this, which I think make a lot of sense. I serve as the ranking member of the Joint Committee on Housing as well as the State House, and we were able to pass a housing bond bill this past year, which is going to create tens of thousands of new units of affordable housing all across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And on the South Shore Housing Report, I was privileged to be a member of that commission, where my staff and myself were able to input on a lot of the major issues that we have here on the South Shore. I think that with 2007 was a real game changer in the South Shore with the opening of the Greenbush line. And I think that has allowed for this transit-oriented development that is a real game changer in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We've seen some of it already in the very early stages in the Weymouth-Braintree landing with the 53 landing development. We have the DeLagus property, which will hopefully be redeveloped. The Kiley property, which is, if you're familiar with the Weymouth landing area where Passport is, Joe Brada is building 42 units, Metri is building 14 units. So as you see this effect where the state comes into an area that has public transportation and says that a public transportation area is a dynamic place to put housing because it connects people to so much more than putting an affordable housing project in some of these areas that have been proposed time and time again that are irresponsible. And so when they put them next to a train station, you're actually allowed to connect that person to the resources that they need, whether that resource be their job, whether that resource be a hospital, whether that resource be a benefit center. Whatever that resource may be, that train connects them, and in turn creates a huge community. So housing on the South Shore, I believe, is going to be spurred by transit-oriented development. And that $2.2 million for the investment into Scituate is going to go right in Greenbush and connect that, fix the sewer system there to allow for those units to go in there. In addition to that, I think that a major component is Union Point. And at Union Point, you have the opportunity for 3,855 housing units right here in the South Shore. And I think that there can't be a better spot when you're on a commuter rail, you're 15 miles south of Boston, Route 18 is being widened. The state has invested, again, during the time that I've been in office, to complete the East-West Parkway, the Delahunt Parkway. You have ample opportunity and limited potential at Union Point. The ownership structure and some of the hiccups that we've had in the starts and stops have definitely weakened people's expectations of what's going to be up there. But I can assure you that that's going to be a dynamic project that is going to lead to a lot of housing, a lot of pride, a lot of jobs, and a lot of revenue for the South Shore. And once the commercial gets in there, then the sky's the limit, because that is truly going to be one of the best underdeveloped properties in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and one of the largest developments in the entire Northeast United States. So I think that those two things, as far as the transit-oriented development on the Greenbush line, a mixed use, hopefully in a mixed use style, as well as Union Point, as well as trying to get a buy-in from communities to adopt some of the new zoning laws that are going on at the State House. I support the governor's zoning bill, which provides a lot more local control than the Metropolitan Area Planning Council zoning bill. But I think that there's compromise to be made somewhere in the middle there to spur growth, to allow for housing development, but responsible development. Because I don't think that there's anything more important than credible leadership and credible development when it comes to right here in the South Shore, because people are concerned about their infrastructure, their water, their sewer. All these things matter, and to go through the process at the state level, we can't put a one-size-fits-all approach to this. We need to do this responsibly.
Thank you, Patrick. Our next topic is opioids. Obviously, this is an ongoing epidemic here on the South Shore, here in the state, and around the country. There have been many situations where it has been addressed, but it's still a chronic problem. And what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, addiction is really hard to treat. So As a pediatrician, I deal with families who are struggling with addiction all the time. And personally, my sister has been struggling with addiction since she's been a teenager that I've been helping her with, and our family has. There's probably not a single person in the room who has not personally dealt with addiction, had a family member who's dealt with addiction, or as part of a community that, of course, is dealing with addiction, because it affects everybody. And the reason addiction is so hard to treat is you need to approach it multifactorially. And I just don't think that we're doing stuff enough and fast enough for it. And some of the things that we need to do is we need to incentivize more primary care physicians, nurse practitioners, physician assistants to learn how to medically manage opioid addiction. We just don't have enough people that we know from studies that medically managing opioid addiction increases your chance of actually helping, right? Helping combat it. And we just don't have enough people who know how to manage it. And there isn't a reason why we can't increase training for it. When I originally started as a pediatrician, I wasn't very well versed in ADHD or attention deficit disorder or treating depression or anxiety. But I saw a real need for it in my patients, and so you take extra classes and you learn how to do that. And so I can do that now. I think a lot of clinicians just are scared of doing that. But also there's a problem with how we fund healthcare, right? So people with addiction need more time. You have to spend more time to help them. And the way that we do billing and stuff like that is super complicated. So Virginia actually is doing a new program that looks pretty great, where they've increased the amount of funding for Medicaid, because that's what they can do, and have found that more providers, because they're getting paid better to spend longer time with families, they've seen an increase in people treating addiction. And consequently, we're going to see improvements in that. So that's one of the ways that we need to go about that. I mean, there's so many different aspects when it comes to addiction and so many different pathways that people with addiction go. There's a percentage of people who can get better. Whether you give them therapy, whether you give them medical management, they get better. There's a subset of people that relapse, that keep needing to go back into the system. But then we need to have the resources available for them so that if they do, they have treatment. And then there's a subset of people that no matter what you do, you can't necessarily get them better, but we need to treat them as human beings, and we need to treat them with dignity, and we need to treat them in the way that we can make their quality of life better. So I think we need to do all of these things all at the same time. And again, that's why I stress we don't have a physician in our state house. We don't have anyone with a medical background that would understand this and what is needed. And I think it's high time that we do, because this is a big problem. And we need to have people who understand it, who are in the front lines, who deal with it on a daily basis. Talking to other specialists, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I know a lot of psychiatrists, right? And so we can get their input, and we can move on this in a faster way, because we need to.
Thank you. Patrick, your thought on the opioid situation?
Yeah, the opioid crisis, I think, is the worst public health crisis that we've ever experienced in the United States of America. We have, one of the major reasons that I decided to run for local office was after coming back home, seeing so many of my friends struggle with addiction. At that point in time, it was prescription drug addiction. It had not regressed to the heroin and fentanyl that we see now. But at that point in time, Weymouth got ravaged, as a lot of the towns on the South Shore, with this crisis, and I just couldn't sit idly by and not do anything. And so Weymouth has taken an interesting approach. All of these communities really have. There's some amazing people on the front lines of this opioid crisis, whether it be Anne Marie Galvin, Jen Cantwell, or all these people on the South Shore who are doing amazing work tying the communities together to make sure that we end the stigma that's associated with the opioid crisis, that we continue to put community-based support systems there for people in recovery, and that we provide every measure of assistance that we possibly can to those individuals still struggling with addiction. And the story of Weymouth is that For a while, we didn't know how to really react to this, because it wasn't healthcare professionals that were on the front lines of this. It was our police and our fire departments that were on the front lines of this crisis for far too long, before the real structure came in place that we desperately needed, and I think that Governor Baker really spearheaded. And so, for far too long, our police and fire were on the front lines, and they still are, and they've taken an ownership stake in this in my hometown. And what they do is, after police and fire, who administer the Narcan in our community, after an individual is released from the hospital, the police officer, Sergeant St. Croix, shows up to that individual's house, plain clothes, not in a cruiser, and says, "I'd like to sit down with you." He lost a family member to this crisis, and he wants to help as many people as he possibly can. We implemented this program, and as I said, it's an aggressive but compassionate approach, and it's a community-based approach. And we implemented this program about 4 years ago. The Patriot Ledger reported that in 2017, September 2017 to September 2018, overdose deaths in the town of Weymouth are down 90%, and overdoses are down 42%. I'm not saying that it's just because of that project, and I'm not saying that that's an outlier to the entire state. I truly believe that this crisis is continuing to go down. It's still, don't get me wrong, it is still a major crisis, but we are doing as much as we possibly can, and it starts right here, right at home. It starts with people understanding addiction. It starts with people then going into and helping individuals on an individual basis, one by one, try and get the assistance and the help that they need. And then from there, at the state level, it's our responsibility to make sure that we put in the precautionary measures to make sure that there is no more overprescribing, that there is no more written prescriptions, that everything will be eventually into a database, to make sure that there's 1,100 new beds, which we were able to do through the CARE Act and the STEP Act, to make sure that we're the national leader on addressing this crisis, and we use the amazing talent that we have here in our healthcare and medical professional to do as much as we possibly can to bring everyone at the table and say, how do we solve this? How do we solve this? And that's something that Governor Baker has done tremendously well. Secretary Sutters is an amazing, amazing advocate, an amazing individual who does work day in and day out. And we've seen the progress where after years and years and years of double-digit increased deaths, we've seen sort of a flat line, that it's starting to go in the right direction. So that means we need to continue our work, continue to support the community programs happening right here that Anne-Marie Galvin's doing day in and day out to make sure that this, on a local level, is taken care of in a compassionate but aggressive way.
Thank you, both Patrick and Katie, for your thoughts on the opioid crisis. I'm going to stay on topic with medical. Ballot question number 1, the nurse staffing question, which has been very widely publicized from both sides of the ballot on that. What are your thoughts on question 1, nurse staffing?
So it shouldn't have been a ballot question. Healthcare is too complicated to solve in a yes or no, right? But it is the problem with our legislature that they have not been listening to the nurses for 20-something years, that they've been advocating and saying, look, we're seeing unsafe things in hospitals, we really need help on this, and we think this would be helpful to increase patient safety, and they didn't listen in order to pass something, and so it went to a ballot question. So the answer is I'm a yes. I'm a yes on it because I'm a pediatrician and I believe in safety, and I believe that this will increase safety for people in the hospital. And at some point or the other, you're going to be in the hospital and you'd like to be as safe as you can. I've worked in hospitals. I've watched nurses struggle with the amount of patients that they need to take care of, and I've watched medical errors happen because of it. So I think we need to do this to make people safe. But I do understand that it's going to increase money, and that's the problem with our healthcare system that I keep bringing home point after point, is that our healthcare system is a disaster, and we have to figure out where the money's going to come from. So in the end, again, this would be really helpful to have a physician in your state house, because regardless of how this pans out, if it's a yes, then we still need to figure out the money and how this is going to work. And having someone with my skill set and experience in there would be really helpful. And if it's a no, we still need to listen to the nurses, and we need to make our hospital environment safer for everybody. So that's what I feel about it.
Patrick, your thoughts on ballot question 1?
Sure. So in 2014, the legislature did act, put in ratios of 2 to 1 in all of the intensive care units. One of those is the neonatal intensive care unit, which my mother happens to be a 40-year nurse in. And she is up at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Before that, she was in St. Margaret's, in Brighton, St. Elizabeth's, and Dorchester, St. Margaret's. And so I see it from her perspective, where she was on the verge of retiring and saying that the staffing ratios were totally out of whack inside of her unit. And since the implementation that the state legislature did in 2014, she's seen a drastic change, has been able to stay in her job, and she believes that patient safety has dramatically increased in her unit. And so taking me from that perspective, I started as sort of a baseline and then read into a lot of the reports, both on the pro and the no side. I sat down with a lot of nurse managers at South Shore Hospital. I sat down with South Shore Hospital themselves and saw it from their perspective. I sat down with the M&A and saw it from their perspective. And at the end of the day, I came up with the conclusion that it is a very complicated issue and it really shouldn't go to the ballot. I personally think that given some more time, a compromise could have been made between the Massachusetts Hospital Association and the Massachusetts Nurses Association. I spoke with the governor about this specific issue, and although he has chimed in that he has tried over 15 meetings to try and get this done. So at the end of the day, I'm a yes, because I believe that we can take this baseline as far as the ratios that the M&A is proposing, and we can do the exact same thing we did with the recreational marijuana question, and that's go in it and try to fix some of the things that would be the huge drivers that the hospitals are saying aren't equitable. And I believe that there could be some sort of phase-in approach. I believe that there's compromise still to be had. You know, this is an incredibly expensive ballot question. And I always say that it's ironic that we have the most popular governor in America, and we have one of the most recognizable national political figures in Elizabeth Warren, and the biggest driver of votes out with both of them on the ballot is going to be a ballot question about safe staffing. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. But that's how big this issue has become and how divisive this issue has become on both sides. But at the end of the day, if the ballot question passes, the legislature cannot allow for hospitals to shut down, or for hospitals to stop for programming, or for hospitals to close down units. And if it doesn't pass, the legislature can't allow for unsafe staffing to go on, for patients to not having a nurse by their, in a reasonable ratio, and for some of these mistakes to be happening because of that. So at the end of the day, whether or not this ballot question passes or fails, the legislature is still going to have to act in some capacity. So I believe that this ballot question brought the legislature back to the table after the compromise of 2014, because that was a ballot question too that the legislature was able to compromise before my time, but I was working up at the State House at that point in time. And I believe that this is the exact same parallel that we had to 2014. And I believe that at the end of the day, there's going to be compromise that's going to be made, patients going to be safer, and hospitals aren't going to have to absorb all this expense.
All right, thank you to Patrick and Katie on your opinions on ballot question 1. For those who are just tuning in, we are talking conversation with the candidates here at the Mill Wharf in Scituate with Patrick O'Connor and Dr. Katie McBrine. The next question I have for you is somewhat open-ended and can actually work into some of the previous discussions that we had, and that is veterans' needs. Obviously, that can fall into workforce, housing, opioids, and other topics that we've had so far. So what are your feelings, Katie, on what some of the veterans' needs are here in the district?
Yeah, no, veterans are very important to me. My dad is actually home getting my kid on the bus, hopefully, anyways, and he's a veteran of the Vietnam War. And my two grandparents, my grandfather, who is still alive at 98, is a veteran of World War II. He was a dental technician there. And then my grandfather on my mom's side, who unfortunately just died last year, he was a veteran of World War II, also in the Army, and he was a Jewish man in Germany and escaped and came to America and was so incensed by what happened that he joined the Army and went back and fought in France. So I'm very proud of my history. I'm very proud of the veterans in my family, and we can do more. We can always do more, right? nothing in life that we've ever done is perfect and cannot be improved upon. And so I think our veterans deserve more. And so a couple of those things that I see is, of course, housing, right, that we touched upon before, affordable housing and making sure that they have a place to live. And then jobs, right? There's a lot of skills that you pick up and you learn in the military, and sometimes it just doesn't translate for whatever reason when you come back here because of licensing or whatever. And I think we can fix those things and make sure that our veterans have a place to live and that they're working, because that's what living is about. That's improving quality of life, and that's what we can do and can give them, and that's what I think is most important.
Thank you. Patrick, your thoughts on veterans' needs here in the district?
Yeah, the first speech that I gave in the Massachusetts State Senate was to end veteran homelessness, to create a commission to look into that. President Barack Obama was actually one that charged the nation with looking at this. Virginia has achieved zero-based homeless veteran status, and I want Massachusetts to do that. So it's the first speech, it's a maiden speech, so everyone has to listen, everyone has to sit down, which is rare because everyone's sort of working, and it's a very working type environment in the state senate. And so after the speech, we got to work on the specific issue, and since that point in time, in 2.5 years, we've opened up a veterans house in Weymouth with a collaboration of state, federal, and community-based resources, which has 6 beds for homeless veterans. We have secured $100,000 to create a new home, which is happening because we connected the state, federal, and local-based approach as well in Marshfield, right on Ocean Street. And we're going to continue to try and produce this model. Actually, Commander Rush, who's a state senator from West Roxbury, down to the house in Weymouth to try and show him this as a model that we can replicate. Because if we had one in every single community, we wouldn't have homeless veterans. Actually, if we had one, I think, in just 1/3 of the communities, we wouldn't have to say the words homeless veteran. So on the housing front, that's what we've been trying to do, is address the most critical need of housing that we have, because I believe if anyone goes overseas and serves this country and comes back home, they should be able to have a place they call home. The second aspect of this is every single year on Memorial Day, we have a bill. It's been the Brave Act, the Valor Act, various different names they give to it, but every single year we increase the amount of resources and supports that we have for all of our veterans. We look at what's going on around the nation, and we see the best practices, and we implement them here in Massachusetts. So we will continue to remain #1 in offering supports and services to our veterans. The VA system in Massachusetts is by far the best VA system that we have in the entire country. It's because of people like Joe Moakley and Tip O'Neill and Ted Kennedy, who fought tooth and nail because their constituents would call them day in and day out, who were veterans, to make sure their healthcare system was good. So as far as the healthcare VA system we have in Massachusetts, it's relatively on a good track, especially compared to the rest of the nation. And then it's, what do we do with the veterans who are down here facing rising property taxes? We were able to create a program inside of the Massachusetts State Senate, which I filed an amendment for to increase, and it's a community-based property tax work-off program. I worked with Keith German, who's the Veteran Service Officer in the town of Hingham, as well as John Asher, who's the Hingham Veterans Council Director, and we were able to increase it from $1,000 to $1,500. So if you're a veteran and you come back and you're facing rising property taxes in your years of retirement, you can go and say, after I got back from the military, I was an accountant. You can go down to the senior center and help senior citizens file their taxes. And by doing that, you get paid $15 an hour to then go against what your property tax burden is. It's been a huge program. We're going to implement it in Weymouth. Next year, hopefully, we're going to start with 15 veterans to work through that program. And if you're a disabled veteran, we have major increases. It starts at 10% off your property taxes, goes all the way up from there. And that's what we're doing here in Massachusetts. We're trying to provide as many resources as we possibly can for those brave men and women who put on our uniform and defend our freedoms day in and day out, because that's exactly what they deserve. And every single year we update it. And on a community level, we're doing a lot here on the South Shore to end veteran homelessness and to provide all the resources for our veterans and to have them stay in their home in retirement.
Thank you. Again, to our listeners here, we're here at the Wharf restaurant here in beautiful Scituate Harbor with conversations with the candidates, Patrick O'Connor and Katie McBrine. As we sit here on the waterfront at Scituate, there was an interesting article that I saw on the Patriot Ledger's website regarding the fishing industry here in Scituate that not too long ago was, I think, over 40 vessels, and now there's 4. And there's a local business person here that is implementing a plan where he's going to kind of invigorate the local fishing community by building a processing facility and using the fish that are caught here locally to serve our restaurants here on the South Shore, where a lot of times the restaurants have to buy their fish from vendors from the Boston Fish Pier, and that's coming from international waters, etc. Obviously, the fishing industry is something that is on the wane here, but I thought this was an interesting concept. But what are both of your thoughts on ways to help the fishing communities and opportunities like this that have come up?
Yeah, no, this Sunday article was a good article. You guys should check it out, and what he's trying to do. I didn't realize they ship so much away from here rather than keeping it here. So, I mean, I think first and foremost we need to talk to the fishing industry. I did get to sit down with the Lobstermen's Association many months ago, and had a really great discussion about some of the things that they need and some of the things that they're running into, right? So there's a very small window of time in which they can put up traps and do things like that, and there's a lot of regulation that doesn't allow them to put up the traps because of whales and conservation stuff. So we need to have we need to sit people down and have a better discussion, you know, and figure out how can we allow you to do your job in a way that helps you and your families and the communities, but also, of course, keep the environment safe and what we need to do. So I think the same goes with the fishing, the entire fishing industry, whoever's fishing, is to sit down and have conversations and figure it out, right? There can be solutions out there. I mean, this is what I do on a daily basis as a pediatrician, is I listen. So we need to sit people in a room and have a conversation and listen to what their concerns are and what they have to say and get all the players in. And then we problem solve. We can take scientific evidence. That's what I do. There's probably studies. We can figure it out depending on what the problems are and come up with some solutions that'll work with people. So I think that approach, which I do all the time, can apply to this and to many things, and can be helpful.
Thank you. Patrick, your thoughts on the fishing industry or ways to invigorate the fishing economy here on the South Shore?
Yeah, so I think the processing that they're going to try and do here is very much similar to what they're doing in Gloucester right now, which is created a lot of jobs, and actually the Seaport Economic Advisory Council has just recently awarded them a grant to go out and then start marketing made in Gloucester and have it be more of less of a regional thing, more of a state thing, which I think the same can happen here in Scituate. Regulations are killing the fishing industry. There's no other way to really say it. When you talk to any single one of these fishermen who are out here day in and day out doing one of the toughest professions that I think that we can all say exists, especially the 365 guys, the federal government just continues to put regulation after regulation after regulation that restricts what they're able to do. And I believe there's a friendly balance that can be found between preserving and conserving our environment as well as allowing for this economy to thrive. Not only is Scituate a port, but Marshfield's a port, and we need to continue to let it thrive. There's no real one-stop solution to allowing this to happen other than going to the federal government and saying, you're literally killing an industry, how do we prevent this from happening? And there's a lot of states in the federal government that don't have this, that are landlocked, that don't see what we see day in and day out, see the need, see that this is literally putting food not just on our table but on their table. And we need to do as much as we possibly can to find compromise up at the federal government, which is in this day and age nearly impossible to get done because of the divisive nature of the Democrats and Republicans fighting in DC, and say, hey, look, this is a real industry we need to look at and we need to save. And we see it day in and day out as we look out onto this beautiful harbor, and maybe even a fisherman going out right now. You know, this is something that we really need to do. And I can't tell you how often I went down to DC last August, I believe it was, to have some meetings down there in regards to this. We've spoken with Bruce Tarr, who's an amazing leader on this issue up at the State House, who's the senator for Gloucester. We've spoken to Mark Montigny, who's down in New Bedford, who wants to help on this issue. We're all facing the same issue, and that's federal overreach into an industry that is literally strangling out of what's going on. And we need to think out of the box, like these processing plants, and like the Buy Gloucester, Buy Scituate, so you bring people back in that have that community spirit and small business mindset to hopefully, on their own almost, keep this industry afloat.
Thank you. Got about 10, little less than, oh, we have 5 minutes left. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to just, this last question or what have you, would be your most district-specific concern, which can kind of tie in everything that we've talked about so far. So if we can limit this to about 2.5 minutes apiece, that would work out just great.
So the biggest district concern that I see, so many things, is that they're trying to put in a compressor station in Weymouth. This compressor station is a big problem health-wise because it compresses gas. They're exceedingly dangerous. They've never been put into a high-density area. They're usually put very far away from any population because they have a chance of exploding, which is a big problem when you have lots of people around. And so they want to put this near the Fore River Bridge, which is of course heavily densely populated and has the plus bridge that just got built. Even if it doesn't explode, it emits a ton of carcinogenic or cancer-causing chemicals that is used in order to deal with the gas. So it's a public health hazard, and it needs to stop. And so people have been fighting it for a few years now and trying to. The area in which they want to put it in is a big industrialized area, and just when talking with people around there, it seems to have a high cancer rate. So one of the things that I would like to do is put in a permanent air quality monitoring station. The reason for it is, so right now they're monitoring the air from the Blue Hills, which as a person who cares about science, Blue Hills is not close enough to monitor our area. And so we would like to put one there so that we can get more data to support the fact that this area is probably already heavily polluted and we should be doing stuff to clean it up, and that we really cannot put another thing like that in there. So that's one of the main issues that I'm looking at. But again, as a pediatrician, health and safety is my biggest concern. So the healthcare system and how it's a mess and how we need to fix it. I can go on for days. Do not have 2.5 minutes for that, but that's really what I want to see myself in the State House as a leader on, because we don't have anybody who's a physician in our State House to be that leader on that issue that so many families and businesses are struggling with. And we need to start moving on it now because it's a big problem. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of energy. Got a lot of energy, and I'm ready to work on it.
All right, thank you. Patrick, your largest district concern, or I don't know if you wanted to address the compressor station, whatever, it's up to you.
Yeah, I think growing our local economy is the first and foremost thing that we need to do. Obviously, the compressor station is a huge issue, and we're fighting that for 4 years. But as far as the entire district goes, growing our local economies is going to lead towards what we see right now. I feel a lot of progress going on in the South Shore. I feel a lot of incomes rising on the South Shore. I see a lot of businesses being created on the South Shore. I see a lot of great development going on the South Shore. I see a lot of state investment into infrastructure on the South Shore. All of that, it goes into growing our local economies. And as we grow our local economies, it increases our tax base. When we increase our tax base, we do that by creating businesses. As we create businesses, we create jobs. And as that tax base continues to go up, we fund the great education systems that we have here on the South Shore. We improve the ones that aren't doing as great. We invest in our public safety. We invest in our infrastructure. We invest in our DPW. And we continue to grow and create these great communities that we have. I feel so honored and privileged every single day that I can go out, when I'm not up at the State House, I can go out in this district and see so many amazing things happening. I always say that the two best parts of this job is being able to help people and being able to recognize people who are doing amazing stuff. And I honestly can't even fit in my schedule enough time to recognize the amount of people who are doing amazing stuff down here on the South Shore. And it's because we grow our economy. It's because we're not just a community, we're a family here on the South Shore, and we do things to make sure that we continue to keep that community spirit and family spirit alive. And one of the things that I've been privileged and honored to do is being able to go up and be your voice on major issues up in the state Senate. And I think of all of you every single day when I keep that, when I cast my vote, I think of all of you and all of these stories that I've heard. There's been a lot of things that we've been able to accomplish over the past 2.5 years. I can't wait for the next 2 years. The South Shore is on the rise. We are ready to continue this progress and continue to make Massachusetts a better place to live, work, and raise a family, and the South Shore an even greater place.
All right, thank you very much. You've been listening to Conversation with the Candidates here with Senator Patrick O'Connor and Dr. Katie McBrine. Be sure to cast your votes next week in this important election. Again, thank you to the Scituate Chamber of Commerce for the opportunity to have this conversation with the candidates, as well as the Marshfield, Norwell, and Weymouth Chambers and the Hingham Business Council and the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. And today's sponsor, Comprehensive Benefits Administrators, thank you. And to the Mill Wharf and to Scituate Cable. So that concludes our conversation with the candidates today, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.